it is fundamentally undemocratic to suggest that a vote for populism threatens democracy simply because we disagree with those elected.
Thank you, and I now look to the Chair of Consultative Committee, Lincoln College, to open the case for the opposition.
Slander and denigration. Slander of the common man's intelligence and denigration of the average voter. That is what the proposition has already begun to convince you of tonight. Mr. President, members and guests, the motion before us tonight is significant. It questions not only our understanding of democracy, but our commitment to democratic values. It asks us to consider what democracy means to us, and whether that concept itself is worth protecting. In my speech tonight, I will make three very simple points. I know the proposition isn't fond of simple things. I will first argue that populism is, in effect, democracy in its purest and most authentic form. I will then ask you to consider what an objection to populism truly entails, before demonstrating that the real threat to democracy lies with the failure of democratic checks and balances. I will demonstrate that if you are a Democrat of any kind, then you must be a populist too. Before I delve into my arguments, however, I would like to congratulate the President and everyone on committee for putting together such a fantastic term. I am sure that all members gathered tonight will agree with me when I say that you've done a truly fantastic job. I would also like to thank the President for the opportunity to speak in this debate tonight. Next term, I will embark on my year abroad, so this will be my last term on committee. Probably. I've had the privilege of serving this institution for over a year now, and in that time, I have been fortunate enough to have enjoyed some truly unique opportunities. Tonight, as I debate amongst such esteemed and intelligent speakers that you will hear from shortly, I really am reminded of everything this place has given me. Most of us are only in Oxford for so long, and I can't encourage you enough to give the union a go. Most of all, though, as I look around this chamber tonight, I can't help but smile, as I see so many familiar faces and friends. Like anything, it is the people, pun unintended, that make this place what it is. And I am grateful to have met so many wonderful people during my time here. You all know who you are, so thank you. And now, with great pleasure, it falls upon me to introduce the speakers for the proposition tonight. You have just heard from Rachel Haddad. Rachel is a first-year history and politics student at Balliol College and serves as the union's secretary this term. I first met Rachel at a debate dinner last term, when she told me all about how behind she was on her degree work, but assured me I'm definitely getting a first at prelims. As I see you sitting here tonight, Rachel, good luck. I have to say, I'm both pleased and slightly surprised that she decided to dress for the occasion tonight, considering she won the worst dressed award on committee last term for wearing pajamas to every single meeting during term. Rachel's rise to the office of secretary was so quick and so efficient that I don't even remember her running. And if her more recent electoral history is anything to go by, then, Madam Speaker, Mr. Dugmore, I'm afraid she won't be on your team for very long. All jokes aside, however, Rachel is one of the most hardworking people I've met in this place and has put a tremendous amount of work into planning so many wonderful socials for us all this term. I really can't think of anyone I'd rather have as secretary this term, and I'm truly proud to be able to serve alongside her. Next, you will hear from Mr. Ollie Dugmore. Mr. Dugmore runs Politics Show, a fantastic online news service that I'm sure many of us have turned to before. I will be the first to say I was a little disappointed when I learnt that his name isn't really Joe, but nevertheless, he's contributed over 1,000 articles to Joe Media alone and writes primarily on British politics and society. His own website describes him as the outlet's often nominated but rarely award-winning head of news and politics. I'm not surprised he's speaking against the will of the people tonight. And finally, of course, you will hear from Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi was the first woman elected as US House Speaker and served in this position for a total of 8 years. She was also the first woman to lead a major political party in either chamber of Congress, leading the House Democrats for a whole 20 years. In her time, she's presided over landmark changes in legislation and overseen significant moments in American history, including not one, but 2 presidential impeachments in her time as Speaker. Mr. President, you may want to keep an eye out. On a serious note, though, her political record is beyond long and decorated, and I'm very excited to hear the Speaker Emeritus' contribution to the debate this evening. Mr. President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. Let us then address the nature of populism. Though it may often be painted with broad, disparaging strokes as mob rule, as something to be feared, and as a product of far-right radicalization in our societies, at its absolute core, we must acknowledge that populism is the will of the people. Nothing more and nothing less. Democracy, at its core, is rule for the people by the people, is it not? Then why must we juxtapose the two? Populism does not appear out of nowhere. It emerges when ordinary citizens feel that their voices, the voices that their democracy ought to exist to serve and to amplify, have been sidelined. Populism emerges when ordinary citizens decide that enough is enough, that the system is broken, that they will be heard. When we speak of the threat posed by populism, there are 2 groups of people that we can direct our frustration towards. The proposition may choose to blame the common man. The proposition may argue that it is the common person's fault that to vote for a leader that is so clearly pandering to heightened emotions is the essence of irresponsibility. They might try to convince you that the average voter does not know what they want. They already have. For if they knew what they wanted, then they couldn't possibly be so stupid as to act and elect a power-hungry populist. But I would contend that we cannot reasonably blame members of a democratic society for exercising their democratic right in favor of another who participates legitimately in that democratic process. Not right now. The Oxford Union characterizes itself as the last bastion of free speech. Our commitment to that principle of free speech fundamentally means that we respect the right of others to oppose our views as much as we expect our own views to be heard. Surely this equity of voice must be applied to any fair democracy as well. If you believe that your neighbor is mistaken in their political beliefs, then your democratic duty is to participate in the process and vote another way. Equally, if we cast our gaze towards the politicians that we may often label as populist, it is easy to see why we have a natural disdain for populism. Trump, Orban, the list goes on. We are surrounded by right-wing populists who promise working people the world before enacting policy change that is either limited or even antithesis to the popular will. Yet as much as I may personally dislike some of these individuals, I cannot deny that they are democratically elected. Have their administrations failed to deliver meaningful change for their citizens? Absolutely. But consider members and guests, is this by virtue of their election and rhetoric, or because they exist in an imperfect democracy that fails to prevent regressive policymaking? Undue presidential influence in the composition of the American judiciary allowed for Roe v. Wade to be overturned. A favorable electoral system and influence over the judiciary have allowed Viktor Orban to entrench power. Not at the moment. The real failure and threat here lie not with populism, its supporters, or nor even its practitioners. The greatest threat to our democracy cannot be its natural product. No, it must be the weak checks and balances that permit leaders to neglect the interests of those they have been elected to serve. It is fundamentally undemocratic to suggest that a vote for populism threatens democracy simply because we disagree with those elected. We cannot ring the alarm bells when democracy threatens us, then bask in its favor when it works in our favor. Populism is democracy in action. If democracy is under threat, it is only because that democracy has failed to live up to our expectations. And if democracy is under threat, then we must not, and we cannot, redirect this blame. Populism only succeeds when people feel a deep-seated dissatisfaction with the system and the elites that it empowers. There's an often quoted statistic that America's wealth gap today is many times greater than that of France in 1789 before the revolution. Against a backdrop like this, is it surprising that people are fed up? And if we can't even accept that an unequal society breeds discontent, then our democracy is surely doomed. Populism, when harnessed for real social change, can be the ultimate wake-up call for a stagnant, unfair, and broken system. It offers a voice to the invisible and a platform for the disenfranchised to finally voice their frustrations. Populism is a fundamentally corrective force that channels direct voter engagement like nothing else to highlight the many deficiencies of our society. And with proper checks and balances in place, we can even prevent the rise of demagogues. Left-wing populists offer real, transformative alternatives to a system that is designed and built to exploit us. It is democracy that gives us the opportunity to change the society around us. And it is through that democracy that we shall bring change. We must not be afraid of populism and let it become a tool of the far right. Reclaim populism. Harness its true democratic value. Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy in action, and it is the ultimate tool of democratic renewal. Thank you.